Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Folks in the audience are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to type them into the question or chat sections accordingly. We'll take some time to answer any questions you may have after the presentation. Without further ado, I'll turn the microphone over to Security Title's Agency Manager, Sarah Whitby.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sarah Whitby, an Agency Manager for Security Title, Guarantee Corporation of Baltimore. And today we're honored to have Mike Ridgway from Community Title Network to discuss Remote Online Notarization, also known as RON. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Ridgway.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about RON. We're going to do a couple things. We're going to be going for about 50 minutes or so, and then we'll hold some time for questions. And I'm happy to stay on and go a little bit longer than that for people who have other questions. And so today, what we're trying to accomplish is a couple things. Let me make sure my presentation is moving there. Hopefully everyone saw that page turn. So what we want to try and accomplish today, we want to talk about how we got here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about the context of e-closings in general. That is important, how e-closings got it to this point, how consumer demand is driving change, how lender demand is driving change. We're going to take just a very high overview of the types of e-closings just to make sure everyone's clear with the terminology. And we're going to go over some of the laws of what the RON laws are in Maryland as part of the revisions to the notary laws. Okay. We're also going to talk about some of the benefits of RON, how it works generally. We're going to talk about the state of the market today. I'm going to talk not going to get into anything deep on the RON platforms, but just share with you my experience. Talk to you about how to prepare for RON, and then what you need to know before going live. Again, all of it at a very high level. You'll have my contact information at the end. You can always reach out to me. I'm happy to address any questions that people might have. This is about helping our industry understand how to prepare for what I think is the next big revolution in our business and the way we're going to do business. Before we get started, and in accordance with the requirements for the CE, we're going to have a couple poll questions. So I'd like to bring Anchi back in to ask 2 poll questions and put them up there, and then we'll continue on with the content of the seminar. Anchi?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to put up poll question 1 for the audience. I'll launch that right now. The question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you feel you are with your knowledge and comfort level of RON? 1 being least comfortable, all the way up to 5, which is most comfortable.
And Anchi, once you close the poll, if you can just read off the answers, because I don't see the poll itself.
Of course, yeah. We'll go through them. I see about 64% have voted, so we'll give the rest another about 15 seconds here to enter in and cast their vote, or rather answer the poll, and we'll go from there. Love to share. All righty, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll. Alrighty. So, and I will go ahead and share. Mike, I'm not sure if you can see this now, but looks like 78% of the vote says they are at a level 1, least comfortable, and some of them, the 22%, are at a level 2, at the middle 40 percentile, I'll say. So a lot of our folks are either learning about RON for the first time or are still just not feeling comfortable with the knowledge that they have.
Great. Thank you for that. All right, so poll question 2. Let's launch that one, Anchi, and see what we have from the group there.
Sounds good. All right, so I'm going to launch poll question 2 right here. And the question is, where are you in the process of being able to conduct RON closings? So this will be an interesting question because the first question focused on how comfortable you are. You may have the full knowledge of the entire process already, but just not feel comfortable. So this is a bit more of a more poignant question regarding where they are in understanding and actually performing. So this will be an interesting feedback to assess our audience today. Alrighty, we have about 75% of the votes in, so we'll give it another 10-15 seconds before we close out the poll and take a look at the results. Alrighty, closing the poll out now. And I'll go ahead and share the results with everybody. Looks like the majority, 78%, are still investigating and researching their RON vendors currently, which is a wonderful thing. 11% are in the process of being approved by a RON vendor, which is great. So they're a step ahead there. And then another 11% said they've already signed up with the vendor and are able to perform RON transactions. That's a great little mix that we have there.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you all for participating. That's helpful for us to try and provide some context to the group in terms of how people are feeling and what their experience with it has been. So before we get started, let's talk about the basis of RONs, which are e-closings. And e-closings have been around really since the 1990s, if you will, with the MERS. It has not been very well accepted. And of course, it ballooned when the pandemic hit last year. But let's understand the basis of the electronic closings, where it came from, the legal foundation. The Uniform Electronic Transactional Act, I call it UETA, some people call it UTA, was established in the late 1990s. It gives legal recognition to the electronic signatures and records and even contracts. And there was a special provision that dealt with notary public, with notarizations, and said that it permits a notary public or other authorized officers to act electronically, effectively removing the stamp seal requirements. Okay, so it's talking about providing the ability to have an electronic seal affixed to these documents. Maryland followed the Uniform Electronic Transaction Act shortly thereafter. In 2000, the Congress passed the Electronic Signatures and Global National Commerce Act, e-sign, which basically said that you can use documents. The first set of laws gave legal recognition to these documents. The other ones, the e-sign act, said that people can use these electronic signatures and electronic documents to affect commerce. Okay. In the traditional role of title and closings, you may not be able to see this on your computer if you're looking at a small screen, but basically this is the playing field of how the lenders look at us in the title industry in the spectrum of their entire process. If you look at to the left, the three green boxes, that is their loan operating systems and the point of sale systems. What they do from the time they get a customer, solicit a customer, get them into their mix, process them, they do it all electronically. They've been spending lots of money on that front end and the back end of the settlement for the loan closing process, if you will, including the back end. If you skip over that black square right there, you can see that's the aspect of how they deal with the selling of their mortgages on the back end, the audit process, which are the different groups they go to. The black square is how they view us as an industry. We are the black hole of the process. They have these nice, shiny engines that can run digitally from beginning to end, except in the middle and the handoffs in which we are involved as an industry. Historically, we have been very much behind the curve in terms of technology for them to advance e-closings and digital processes integrated with the title industry. Neither the lending industry nor the title industry could really figure it out because we're always, busy working on the upside in our busy times, or we're always worried about downsizing and worrying about our labor costs on the backside. So we were all riding this roller coaster. It took someone outside the industry, people outside the industry, to really create these end-to-end solutions for our industries, and that's where we are today. So the black hole is how the lending industry has looked at us. They see that we're and what it's indicating that we're a very paper-intensive industry. We have to use paper. That we have to, by processes of recording in certain jurisdictions by paper, the lowest common denominator was paper. A lot of that has changed in advance since the pandemic last year. It was gradually gaining steam in our industry, but the pandemic changed everything, where many more jurisdictions are now in a position to electronically record. We still, though, now actually the title industry, through some of the e-notarization platforms and the technology that's now come about in the title industry, we are now, quite honestly, really ahead. We're waiting for the lenders. I wouldn't say we're ahead, but we're now waiting for the lenders to fulfill the full digital integrated process of a closing by allowing more RON closings and more e-closings. So that's where we are. They're getting their act together, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But this diagram depicts when I sat down with the COO of Notarize years ago. This is how they said the lending industry sees us, and then I thought this was a absolute good way to depict how the lenders look at us right now. And as we know, there's very many stakeholders involved in the process. We not only have lenders, we have their vendors, we have the secondary market on the back end, we have warehouse lenders in the private space, we have clerks of the court, we have e-recording services. Title historically has been an important player. Obviously, we're in the chain, but we have not been very innovative compared to the lending industry for all the reasons that I mentioned before. But let's look at what an e-closing is. An e-closing is defined as an electronic execution. An e-closing involves an electronic execution of some or all of the closing documents packages, of the closing package, okay? There are both in-person e-closings and there can be remote online e-closings, and they're all being executed today. Where this new term has come about, a hybrid e-closing. We're going to talk about that. A digital mortgage is one step beyond that. That's where the critical loan documentation, specifically the promissory note, exists in digital format, and it's just data that's being transferred. So that's where lenders, that's what where MERS comes in, where we're storing documents. We're really storing data in the form of quote unquote documents. And there's a whole body of law that is out there that relates to electronic notes as opposed to wet signed notes. And that's where the industry is really struggling right now with making sure that they feel comfortable if they had to foreclose on a document that the note was enforceable and the deed of trust was enforceable to foreclose. But so the digital mortgage is where everything's executed electronically, it's transferred digitally, and it's ultimately stored digitally. And that's the process where that's really exploded, and that where we're all headed to. So let's look at it just very quickly to make sure we're all talking about the same things. I'm going to go through this really quickly. Types of e-closings. You know, we certainly have the hybrid e-closing. We have an e-note. We have a fully digital closing. We even have a remote or virtual digital closing. And then now we even have the hybrid RON. So those are the categories that we're going to discuss. Certainly we have the traditional closing where all the documents are signed in person, by paper, with an in-person notary, and we go through the traditional ID verification process where the signer is giving the notary some form of picture ID that's required now. We have the hybrid e-closing where some of the procedural documents, not all the documents, but most of the documents now can be signed electronically. We see a number of lenders trying to perfect that process. However, they still want certain documents with wet signatures, typically the deed or the deed of trust, mortgage, or the promissory note. Still, it's an in-person notary, and we're still dealing with the traditional ID verification of just, hey, here's my driver's license showing it's me. We have the e-closing that's in person, which is a little bit step up, where all the documents are signed electronically, including the note and the deed of trust. It's signed on a laptop or a tablet or something like that, but we still have the notary present signing, it's an in-person notarization and they're somehow affixing their seal. And again, it's a traditional ID verification. Welcome to the world now of the virtual closing, which is what Ron has basically allowed us to create. All the documents are signed electronically. They're signed, they're used, we're using a laptop or a tablet. There's a webcam notary, and that's a big step up because the notary laws in Maryland had to be redrafted to include presence, to have the word, the meaning of presence, have someone on a audio visual screen able to communicate like we are today, where you can see me and hear me and you can see what I'm doing. The webcam, the notary's presence is allowed now to include that web scenario. And then there's also an electronic ID verification, which is actually more comprehensive and creates better validation than me just looking at a driver's license that's been handed to me. Now we also have the hybrid e-closing or the hybrid RON closing, where most of the documents are electronic, they're signed on a laptop. We still have the webcam, the remote notary using a webcam of some kind. There's an electronic ID verification, but the lender still wants, because they don't know where they're going to, most likely because they don't know where they're going to sell this loan yet, they still want a wet signed note and or a deed of trust. So, that we still can do everything. 98% of the loan package can be electronically signed, but they still want the note and the deed of trust signed by that person with wet ink because of how they're going to sell the loan. So that's where those are the loan definitions. Let's talk about the consumer expectations and how they've shifted. 71% of, and this data is sort of old, and we're getting newer and newer data from the result of last year, but it does tell the story. 71% of borrowers were provided an online portal in the lending process. 2 times more likely were borrowers thinking that was a better experience using the technology in the loan process. What's very interesting, we've always thought about, well, that's because the younger people feel more comfortable with technology, they're used to it. The older generations are still doing it in paper and phone calls and so forth. What's amazing about that survey was baby boomers were 3 times more likely to think that technology improved the loan process when provided an online portal. And so as people, including baby boomers, get more comfortable using technology in all aspects of their life, they're going to find this less intimidating and less clunky, and it's going to be more appealing. So electronic promissory notes are taking off. This is what MERS has put out over the years. Just in 2019 through 2020, you can see the increase. And that takes us through August of 2020. And I can only tell you that the increase in promissory notes that are being signed electronically is still increasing at a good pace and scale. This is another slide that shows the difference between 2018, 2019, and 2020. Again, we're trying to get some data for year to date from the various players. We're also going to I'm also teaching, if anyone's going down to the MLTA conference in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing a RON 2.0 course for those people that want to learn about RON at the higher levels. What we learned once we got into doing RON closings to help people along that way. But we'll have some more data and updated data hopefully as part of that presentation. But so consumer expectations, they are looking to consume services more electronically. We've seen that take off since the pandemic. That's only going to continue as people were forced to work virtually and therefore got more comfortable in virtual connections such as this. So let's talk a little bit about the remote online notarization world and what we're looking at. Documents are eligible to be notarized online. Through remote online notarization, they can now have access to that. However, a lot of the states said we need to rewrite our law concerning allowing remote online notarization, because all of our laws are basically in the context of the notary's presence being a physical in-person presence. They had to expand that. They also had to expand what was required as part of this virtual process to make sure that there was no fraud, that they were limiting fraud. It's interesting, when Virginia was the first state that passed the law in 2012, I think it was, the technology didn't even exist at that time. They actually passed the first RON law, but as the technology was developed, the technology and the laws were going hand in hand. As the states were passing laws, they were passing the uniform law on remote online notarization, RULANA. And so, that went hand in hand. Virginia actually is sort of an outlier at this point, because their laws were a little bit different. They're trying now to come into more conformity with the RULANA model legislation, which is what most states have passed. The states have varied a little bit, but this is what the playing field looks like right now. And this actually is from the MBA. This is from the MBA's website, and quite honestly, they're a little outdated. This is the most. I want to point out, let me just say it this way. This is a little bit outdated. I'll show you the map in just a second, but you'll see that Maryland is in the blue. That means there's legislation that's been passed. States in session with active RON bills are in red. And those states that don't have anything that are white means that their legislature is not doing anything at this point. So this was the case about 3 months ago. And I point out California for a reason. I'll come back to that in just a second. This is now the most recent iteration on the NBA's website, where we have a couple of other states down south that now it's been taken off the table for whatever reason. But more importantly, California is now indicating that they have legislation in place. What's important about this is that California's, the Congress, you may have heard there's federal legislation that's been proposed. It was proposed as part of the pandemic stimulus package way back last April. First go around, didn't get any traction anywhere. It has been resubmitted by the Virginia Senator Mark Warner, who's very well respected in the technology world. That's where he came from, and so he's well respected when he introduces bills like this. It's been co-sponsored, supposedly being bipartisan, but it's not going anywhere. And the reason it's not going anywhere, which would be much easier for all of us to work with, would be much easier for the lenders, and they would open the floodgates. The California delegation, state delegation, is very wary about remote online notarization, which is shocking, because that's where so much of the technology companies that have started and grown, that they feel that there's issues with that. So there's just some bias in the state legislation. The problem with that from a federal perspective is that the state legislation, the state legislators and the congressional legislators from California work very closely together. And think about all the people in our congressional delegation across the country that for the country, we've got a lot of powerful players in powerful committees, the committees that this legislation would have to go through. They're all from California, right? Including the Speaker of the House. So we have some issues there, but it's interesting. I haven't seen the legislation that's been posed from California, but once California goes and approves this, I think it opens the door. It opens the door much wider for federal legislation to come through. I think that's the only thing that's holding it up. The lenders, I would think, would encourage it. The lenders are for it. The realtors are for it, and of course, the title association is for it. So let's look at the notarization law in Maryland and what it did. It had to do a couple things. It had to repeal the powers. It basically repealed all the powers and reinstated the powers with the legislation that was passed. It was a total rewrite of our laws, and our MLTA did a really good job writing it. writing the statute to the point that it was, done. We didn't have to have a lot of regulations promulgated after that. But it allows for remote and electronic notarization. It requires certifications, stamps, and records. It allows the notary to refuse notarial acts under certain circumstances, but it requires certain types of evidence of ID required. It says, I left the word unexpired. They were going to allow unexpired government ID, but they took that out. And it also provides charges in the statute that can be set by the Secretary of State for Maryland, and they do control the pricing. But the other big thing is it requires notaries, any notary for any notarization, including people doing real estate. It requires notaries to keep a journal for 10 years. And I actually had a conversation with the Secretary of State saying, hey, listen, we keep our journal through, historically, we've kept our journal through just keeping a copy of the document, the document that was presented, the ID that was presented. We just keep that in the file. And they said that's not sufficient enough, that there has to be a journal that's kept by all notaries for all notarial acts. Some other provisions that, just a glance over, that, notaries now do no longer need to have good moral character and integrity. That was actually a provision in the statute. They removed that. But you must be a resident of the state or work in the state. They just use language, you must formally live in the state or work in the state. They say now you have to be a resident or you have to work in the state to be an active notary. And now there's a renewal process. You have to complete a course, and of course they're going to charge you a fee. So any rewrite now is driving more revenue to the Secretary of State's office from any new notary who's renewing their license, their certificate. So let's look at some of the new definitions that are now coming into play. You're going to hear words like communication technology, what technology has to be used, credential analysis, what's the process of making sure the person is who they say they are, electronic signature, identity proofing. We're going to talk about how the session that's recorded and the documents have to be proofed and tamper-proofed. Record, remote presentation, remotely located individual, stamping device, tamper-evident format. That's the definition that talks about there has to be these remote online notarization sessions have to be sealed, both the documents and the video, in a certain manner. Okay. So anyway, that's some of the requirements in Maryland. Let's talk about, from a notarial standpoint, let's talk about the process. Okay, what are some of the requirements that you need to have? And some of you who are already performing RONs know what these requirements are. First of all, if you're going to do this, you have to provide notice to the Maryland Secretary of State prior to notarizing through the remote online notarization portal. Most portals, I believe, should ask for that approval before they set you up as part of their compliance. So you have to go through that process. It's not a hard process. You don't have to get an application. It's not a fee. You just tell them there's a form on the website for the Secretary of State. Fill it out, send it back to them. That's pretty much then you just get on the list and you look on their website to see if you're approved or not as a remote online notary. Okay, there's requirements for the systems and providers, the portals that have to be approved by the Maryland Secretary of State. There has to be a certain rigor that they comply with. There has to be appearance in person. A person has to interact with another individual by means of audio-visual communication, where they can hear and see and understand each other, much like we're doing right here today. They have to be close enough to see, hear, communicate, and exchange tangible identification credentials with that individual. We'll talk about that process in just a second. There is the requirement of identity proofing, where someone goes through that process. We're going to cover that in a few minutes. There has to be an audio-video record that it has to be recorded, and it has to be with certain technology that does certain things. that make it tamper evident. Okay, and there is again a journal required. Okay. So also they said you can charge fees. They set standard fees. They set maximum fees. They allow for travel fees, but they also indicate that this is only allowed in counties where e-recording occurs. Okay, so that's very important. Now we're getting to the point where all of our big jurisdictions are e-recording. Where Baltimore City is just starting with certain documents. They're not doing deeds. They're not doing deeds associated with deeds of trust yet, so they're not doing full consideration transfers, is my understanding. But we're getting there. Montgomery County now does it, but I don't believe all of the counties yet are e-recording fully throughout the state. Understand that this has to be voluntary on the principal's part. A person is not required to sign documents electronically. That was part of the UETA and the global e-sign laws. They said if people want to deal in paper, they can still deal in paper. That's a requirement. And also, please understand, since this is Maryland, a Maryland title licensee can still conduct the closing as part of this. And so they have to have a title producer's license. Okay, so that is a requirement. So if you're using a platform where you're using their notary, then you have to then technically you have to be on that call as well, and you're conducting the closing, and they're just helping through with the notarization and the signature of the documents that are required to be notarized. All the platforms don't necessarily understand that, and if they do, not all of their notaries understand that. That's where we've had some issue in making sure that this was more from not only a compliance but a customer service standpoint. We've had some of the portals struggle with that concept. Okay, but let's look at the benefits of Iran, and we'll go through some more of the detail. So it's a faster process. It can be a faster mortgage process because it all becomes electronic and it all becomes digital, and these portals can take this documentation and digital information through integrations that they're building, and they can all put them into their portal, and everything comes out and matches. What we're seeing in the industry right now is a lot of integration building. We've got the basic standards of people being able to do RON. Now the next step is, well, the integration of all the documents, and so all of that is going on at a behind the scenes where they're building integrations, and integrations are just getting better and better and better. It's going to be a lot easier. So a lot of the lenders, 90% of the loans use Encompass for their integration purposes as a portal. We have a lot of different portals that are being used for our industry, Black Knight, but all these portals are being tied together behind the scenes, and it's going to be platform agnostic or application agnostic at some point in the future. It's going to take a little bit, but that's what we're going to get to. But because it's a faster process, it's going to be cheaper for not only the lender, it's going to be cheaper for the consumer, because the lenders have said they're going to pass those costs along. The cost of audit through by paper, the cost of getting the documents from one department to the other to the warehouse group. If that takes 10 days to 2 weeks, then there's more risk that the warehouse is putting on that loan. And if they can reduce the risk and by doing it digitally, and it can get sent literally within a couple of hours from when the loan closed, then there's less risk. So the margins are less. It's going to cost that lender less with the warehouse lender to borrow that money, to get that money to them. Okay, they can get it to them quicker, so there's less risk, so there's less cost. Lenders are saying we're happy to pass that along when we get to that process. That means the consumer is going to experience some of the benefits. It's safer. The higher levels of ID validation and fraud prevention are absolutely much better than just if I'm a notary and someone's presenting me a license. If it's a Maryland license, yeah, I see those all the time, right? Or a DC license, because I'm right outside of DC. If someone's presenting to me a Michigan license or an Indiana license or a California license, I see those once in a blue moon. I couldn't tell you if those are real or not, right? So they actually have a much safer, higher, more compliant ID validation and fraud prevention aspect to these. It's a knowledge-based authentication. We'll go through that in just a second. Then you go through step 2, which is the credential analysis, and then it's the notarial review to make sure the person is doing this voluntarily. Maryland actually requires the notary to ask the borrower or the signer to scan the room to make sure there's no one else there that could be off to the side influencing them in any way, shape, or form. That's a requirement in Maryland. That's not a requirement of all the states or the standard model legislation, but no, Maryland requires you to do that. Okay, so let's look at the process and why it's more efficient for the signer. The signer can they typically can receive an email with the documents. Now that's theoretical, that can happen. We know that lenders are going right up until the deadline. But if you're working with a good lender, and there are some that are still getting documents to us well in advance of closing, if they can get the documents to the borrower into their portal at the same time, the signer can receive their documents earlier and they can review them. The signer can then validate their identity, and then they go through the process of meeting with the notary. It's all set up. They go through, the notary's called in, notary's ready to go, and then they go through their video meeting, and then the documents are signed in very quickly, very quickly. It's interesting, when we were working with that company Notarize at the beginning of they were starting to build out their mortgage process. We said, listen, best thing in the world would be if you could build a document signing structure where you could sign all the documents at once. And they said, no, for a compliance standpoint, we want to have each document signed digitally so that there's no question that, hey, I never saw that document. I think most lenders are asking for that. And I think some of the portals might offer that feature. There's so many portals that are springing up now, but that, you may want to just, lender even might have in their loan closing conditions a requirement, hey, each document has to be signed individually. Okay, but the completed documents go back when they're electronically signed. They go back to the portal. They go to the borrower right away. They go to the lender right away. So the process is set up to be an end-to-end solution to be much more efficient. So let's look at the security questions that the signer, what's the process to make sure, we keep talking about this two-step validation process and the fact that it's way more secure. So the first set of questions is what's called knowledge-based authentication. And that's using third-party data from LexisNexis, from different databases. And it's designed to challenge your memory, to challenge you to say, okay, I am who I say I am. And if you've ever gone on these recently, any of you that might use banking online programs, you see that they always want to ask you questions about, okay, you had, which of these 5 addresses did you ever live at? Or you had a car loan. Who was the car loan with? What kind of car have you ever owned? Do you have a relation that owns a house? And if so, where do they own that house? Questions like that. They're giving you it's a multiple choice answer, and you have like 2 minutes to answer 4 or 5 questions. So that's the knowledge-based authentication process. The next step is, and this technology, when they told me this, I said, man, this is so cool, that they capture your identity credentials. We all know the new driver's licenses, passports, and everything have SKUs or codes associated with them. Now what they do is say, okay, I need to identify that have you confirm you are who the person you say you are before we sign these documents. And they literally hold up the driver's license, the front and the back, and those images are captured, and they have access, at least to the group that we use, Notarize, they have access to all these databases. They can tell whether that license, they use technology that goes to the millimeter, that can see whether some of the attributes of the driver's license are real, are authentic, or it's a forgery. And of course, they have the SKU on the background that they can take that goes right to the database and says, yes, this is associated with Mike Ridgway. Okay, it's just unbelievable technology. Much better than, for me, someone hands me a Michigan license that I look at and say, yeah, that looks real. That looks like you. I couldn't tell if it was fake or not. I don't know. This system, they can tell in a heartbeat. Okay, so that's the first process. Okay, and then we go through the process, and then what happens then is the signer and the notary get together. They go through the process of signing the documents, and it's all about creating that customer experience, preparing for that customer experience. It's an audio-visual relation, a meeting, just like you're doing a Zoom or so forth. However, well, I'll come to that in just a second. So let's talk about the current state of RON. It's title insurance. Let's talk about from the title underwriters' perspective, title agents, the real estate agents, the lenders, and the secondary market. Title insurance underwriters did a fantastic job. They've been on the fence, quite honestly, up until COVID hit back in March of 2020. They were a tough go. They're underwriters, right? They didn't want to assume any risk, and so not all underwriters were ready for it. They were saying, listen, we're not going to, if it's passed in your state, then yes, we will allow it. But if it's not, then we're not going to allow it. Then came the pandemic, and the underwriters did a tremendous job collectively, individually and collectively, by allowing it under governor's emergency orders. If the governor addressed it in their emergency orders, and most did, then they allowed it. And there were some documents he had to sign. There's some, we had to provide notices and disclosures and waivers by the borrowers and sellers if they wanted to close that way. But they stepped up and got it done within a couple of weeks. Our industry has gotten better. Once the pandemic hit, the providers, the RON providers, they got inundated. So we know the title agents have been wanting to do this to some degree across the country. Not everybody. And people are still trying to get used to it and fear technology. But the title industry, historically being an industry that is slow to adopt to technology, actually did a much better job. You would have thought real estate agents would be slow to accept this, from the perspective of what we had heard in the industry is they're slow to expect this from the aspect that they want to be part of the customer experience at the table, right? That once the pandemic was finished, that they would be, they wouldn't really accept this technology because they want to be part of the experience. They want to be there for their client. Well, when the pandemic hit last year and RON was becoming available and hybrid RONs were becoming available, we did a lot of webinars like this to the title industry, to real estate agents, to lenders, just to educate everybody on what we had learned and we're trying to implement. And it was amazing. As part of that, just like we did poll questions here, we polled some of the real estate agents, and we polled them and asked them, what would be your inclination to decide to use a title agent if they in fact use RON? Would that be a heavy influence in your factor, whether a title agent was using RON or not using RON? And 80% said it would be predominant in their decision-making process. And then we asked them some of the reasons. Was it more the pandemic? Was it traffic? Although there was no traffic back then. But for any of you who are around the metropolitan areas of Baltimore and Washington, you know that there's a lot of traffic, and the agents, didn't want to deal with it if they could be part of the process if they're invited in. So over 80% said it was going to be a significant factor in them deciding who they would send business to. Lenders have always been historically ahead of us in technology. We are actually waiting for the lenders because lenders are waiting for the secondary market. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, they all got on board. The Fannie Mae executives have said, this is the future. We want to use this as the future model. Now, they allowed all other kinds of loans to be signed, the powers of attorney documents, the RIN closings, but they said, RIN is going to go away. RON is going to be the type of closing that we will allow because the laws are there, the technology is there. We just have to get it to the level where the private secondary market, the big players like Wells and PennyMac, and Citi and Chase, those are the four big players in the secondary market, private secondary market. Once one of them comes in, they're all going to come in. And we hear it's getting close. It sounds like it might be the end of this year that one of them is going to jump in, and when they do, everyone else is going to jump in behind them, and then that opens up everything, and the floodgates will open. Quite honestly, at least from a theoretical standpoint, it's going to take everyone a while to get comfortable with it. But I will tell you that buyers and sellers will want to do it this way because they've gotten used to using technology. It's more efficient for the lenders. It's going to be more efficient for us. It's not necessarily efficient right now. It's a little clunky, and we'll go through some of that reasoning in just a second, but it is going to happen. Now, when we started these webinars last spring, there were only 5 groups that were approved in Maryland when Maryland said they're ready to go. Now I think it's 15, and there's groups being added, it seems, every month. These are the groups. They're all on the website that for the Maryland Secretary of State. These are the RON platforms that have been approved in Maryland. Okay. So how to prepare for RON? You have to understand, you have to look at your technology and your telecom capabilities. Many of us in the title industry many of us in the title industry don't really invest in a lot of technology, right? We were using old technology. The several title agencies that have joined us over the course of the years as part of our business, growing our business, that when they've joined us, we've had to revamp their entire technology platform, bring all new in laptops and computers and servers and all that stuff, and rework their technology infrastructure because it just hasn't been what it should be. So when you have to analyze your technology, make sure you have cameras, make sure you have good internet. Most offices do, but if you're in the outlying areas of the state, then you need to make sure your telecom capabilities are you have good, strong internet. Research your RON companies. Find out which ones offer the best training. Make sure it's going to fit with you. I will tell you that you have to ask the questions. Can you do? Let me see a RON closing right now. Let me see how your technology works. Some of these guys are in theoretical. They're not ready to go live on all aspects of RON. Okay, so you really have to even though the Secretary of State has approved these companies, some of them aren't yet ready to come to the table to deliver a full, complete closing. They're touching on certain things as it relates to RON, but they can't do the big piece. So make sure you're asking those questions. Can they do it now? Make sure you understand about their training programs. How good are their training modules? Do they have training videos? And so forth. Talk to your biggest clients to see who they're aligning with. Okay. I mean, there's a couple big, like any industry, there's a couple big players. They were the ones that were there early. The Notarizes, the Pavassos, the Notary Cams, those seem to be some of the bigger ones because they were there at the beginning. That doesn't mean some of these other ones can't catch up. Get information from your underwriters. Talk to your underwriter about what they know and what they're seeing out there. Talk to your software production provider. See what they're doing, what integrations they have with portals, because if you're going to do a lot of these, and you have a client who wants you to do a lot of these, you need to have an integration. Just trying to create a white labeling of every single document in the loan package is going to be difficult. You need to make sure the integrations exist between your software, their software, and the lender software. The lender software needs to work with the portal that they're using. You have to educate your processing team and your sales team. You have to retrain your processing team and your sales team to say, hey, listen, we can do RON closings. And you have to, we're so used to offer, and this is where we struggled, quite honestly, is where we're so traditional minded in our approach as an industry. It took a lot for us to educate our people to tell them, hey, by the way, instead of Ron being the last resort, we're trying to make Ron the first resort. Okay, how do you sell that to your sales team? How do you sell it to your processing team? How do you train them? You need to make sure you have the training in place before you launch this. You need to prepare and you need to be prepared to modify your workflows. Again, what can you do electronically that creates integrations? Okay, what can you do to create integrations with your workflows? What can you do to create more efficiencies with your workflows as it relates to Ron being the priority? And you need to educate your customers. Your lenders, I will tell you, most loan officers don't know that their companies can do any level of a Ron or a hybrid Ron. I had to actually tell the regional manager of one of the big companies around here that their company could do it, because their operations people know. Most of the managers come from the loan officer ranks, and they're all salespeople. They're not really in tune with the operations. So it's going to be the people at the processing level, the operations level, where you're getting that information. Okay. Again, what you need to know about the training that's offered. You need to understand the support that's offered. How much control does the portal give you? Do they allow you to control the customer experience, or do you have to use their notaries? That was a big deal for us, that when we were starting to go down the road with notarizing, we were actually teaching them about the closing business and how they needed to think about interacting with the closers, the title agencies. We were saying we want to control the experience. They were hearing from the lenders, from the lenders, that the experience that they had with local title agents, or maybe title agents using mobile notaries, that there was such a varying level of service, and they were hearing the horror stories, that the notarized didn't want to give the closing agent the control. They wanted their notary to do basically the closing. We said, no, we want control. So they built that into their systems. And I think we're seeing that from all of the other portals that are out there as well. How can your referral partners participate? You need to ask that question right up front. You need to see it. Can the real estate agent be on with the purchasers and you? Okay. Maybe the loan officer wants to be on as well. How many people can that portal that you're looking at, how many can they accommodate? Can they only accommodate 3 or 4 now? Are they going to be able to accommodate 6 in their 6 months from now? You need to ask those questions. Understand this is a new industry and a new technology. And so you need to be prepared for a continuous evolution of an enhancement of the systems. Just in the time that we've really been trying to do a lot of these since the pandemic, we always knew we wanted to do them as Maryland had passed the law. And knowing that they had put it off until October of 2020, and we were getting ready for it, we thought, okay, we're just going to be ready by July of 2020, and maybe we can talk someone into letting us do them early. But so we were well on our way, and we were in tune with all this. But we also found out that this is really, because it's new technology and we're always learning, and there's so much engineering that's going on and integrations that are going on, that it's still a little clunky. And we have to remember that, let me say this, you also need to think about, how many portal partnerships do I want to have? Do I only need one? Do I need a couple? What are my big clients requiring? Right now, some of the lenders are partnering with some of the RON providers. Ultimately, I think it's going to be, again, it's going to be agnostic, and it's not going to matter who you use, because everyone's going to go into this big giant portal, most likely with Encompass from the lender side and the RON side, and then they're starting to work with, Encompass starting to work with some of the big production software groups in our industry. Do you need several portals? We're only sticking with one right now, because it's hard enough for our people to learn one because it's new. And so as they develop, we don't want to get basically in quicksand where we don't know what we're doing. So we're sticking with one. That doesn't mean that you need to just stick with one, but after our experiences, we're finding out that let's get one down right, and then we'll look to see if we need to actually do another one. By that time, things might change. Okay. The other thing to think about, is, as we do runs, we're getting used to doing them, but it's the customer's first time. It's the customer's first time. So what do you have to do to educate them in advance? Everyone might say, yeah, I want to do a RANA. I can't do this. Or, you know what? I can't now show up at the office, but I still want to close. Throw me onto a remote online notarization closing. It's not that simple yet. There's still some logistics we all have to go through, and there's some timing on that needs to take place. But I will tell you that you need to make sure you prepare your customer for what to expect. Don't think that they're just going to get on there, that they are going to have a camera, that they're going to have the proper internet speed, that they're going to be easily adaptable and it's going to just go like that. Sometimes it's taken us 20 minutes to half an hour to get the person on the other side oriented. Now, because of that, we've developed materials for our customers that will give them information we can send out prior to them that they can read. We're in the process of doing videos. Notarize has some videos that show what it can be done. So, there's this process that we're going through of trying to remember how to educate our people, but also our customers as part of this. And that includes the real estate agents who might want to join you, because it's a little bit easier. They don't have to go through the identification process. They just have to click on a link, but still, they need to understand there's a different dynamic of how we're doing our closing. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more poll question right now. Anshi, if you can come back and ask the last poll question, then we'll open it up to some questions.
Sounds great. I'm going to go ahead and launch the third poll question. The question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, how excited are you about RON closings? 1 is least excited and 5 is most excited. And I'm interested in seeing the response. Got about 71% of the vote in, so we'll give another 10 or 15 seconds for the remainder to respond. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, and I'll go ahead and share the responses with you. So it looks like we have a mixed bag, 50%, which is great. The 50% of the respondents are in the 4 category, which is great. This is better than, it's leaning towards the more excited part. And then we kind of have the mixed bag between 1 and 2 and 3, and then we do have some that are really excited as well. So very good.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. So hopefully this session today has opened your eyes a little bit on this. I will tell you this, that for any of you who are Redskins fans, Washington football team fans now, an old coach, George Allen, always used to say the future is now. We are at the precipice, we are at the doorstep of this changing. And when it changes, I believe it's going to change with the level of a tsunami, because once the secondary market allows this and it becomes national, I think we're going to have quick adoption to it. And so you're going to need to be ready, because it's going to, your customers are going to ask for it. Agents, to my surprise, are going to will ask for it because of a convenience factor. And as you see, at least in our markets, we can't. It's hard for us to get sellers to the table now. You got to show up to get your money and sign, right? So if this is an option for them, and we're able to do it a lot more easily and more efficiently for them and us, then why wouldn't we use a lot of these? So I think we're going to have a quick transition when this does come. I think it's coming at the end of this quarter, at the end of this year at the latest, from what I hear. And then we're going to see 2021 be an exploding year for these type closings. So any questions? Does anyone have any questions for us?
I'm taking a look in the section here, and I don't see any specific questions, but we'll open it up for questions at this time. Feel free to ask them in the question section or just shout them out in the chat section. Actually, we just had one come through. Let me open this up here. The question's a little bit wordy, so I'll try to paraphrase this here. There was an issue one of our audience members had with not being, during the pandemic, not being able to receive a return call from a RON company to get training and onboarding.
Yeah.
As I'm sure, and I know personally that, you know, when we were working with Pabaso, they were just hard to just to get the contact back. It was only because we had a prior existing relationship well in advance that they would return our calls. And let alone they were trying to staff up their onboarding and people because they were already being taxed with the heavy volume as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the direct question was, do you have a direct contact person we can speak with and get the training and signed up? So without having a specific company involved, is there a good route for our these agents to go to? Do they try to find a head honcho, someone to speak with, or is it still okay now that we're quote unquote post pandemic? I don't know, depending on how you're looking at it. Now that things have settled down a little bit, what would be the best route in terms of contacting a vendor to discuss?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we saw that, you know, when there were only 5 companies that were in the business at the time the pandemic hit, that were actually functioning, they got inundated, and they were just trying to take care of their customers who, you know, their group of customers, their growing companies. Texas and Florida had just come on. Florida had just come on as a in that January, last January. So that opened up a whole bunch of volume. Texas had just come on a couple months before that. So those 2 states created volume. They were swamped. They were inundated. And I think now that they have all geared up for, you know, their sales, if going it through a normal salesperson now, you cannot get an answer. I'm sure if you reach out to Sarah, that she can get you a contact at Pabaso. If you have an interest in a company other than them, let me know. But we'll get you, between the 2 of us, we'll get you to somebody, because they are now more moderated in terms of how they can take customers into their funnel. They'll at least talk to you, and they might say, hey, it's going to be 60 days before we can get you going, but they've all geared up for that. So if you tried during the pandemic, you got so busy in your business that you weren't able to go back and concentrate on it, make a call today or tomorrow to somebody, reach out to somebody and see what kind of response you get. And if not, reach out to one of us.
Wonderful. We have one more question here, and I think it's a more general question as well. Do you have any idea of the average cost a title agency can charge a customer for RON? Is there anything in the statute or regulatorily wise that restricts it or limits it?
Yeah. So the charge, I believe, is I got something popped up on my screen here. Okay. Can you all still hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we're regulated by what we can charge for the notary service. It was bouncing back and forth. It might be, I don't know what the exact amount is, but I think it's less than $25 or less for even a RON notarization. My understanding is you cannot charge for the notarization itself. You have to incorporate that into your fees. That's my understanding of how the Secretary of State would like to see that. Most service as a software companies, which is what these companies are, these RON companies are, they actually have in their contract that you can't mention their name in any, if Pabaso or Notarize or any of these other companies has a per charge scenario with you, a relationship with you, then you can't put their name of that company and charge it directly to the borrower and have a check sent to that company. You need to incorporate it into your fee structure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Mike. Alrighty, I don't see any other specific questions, but I just wanted to add one more comment, Mike. I really appreciate your take on the how to prepare for Ron in the sense of not only tooling yourself up in terms of hardware, the computer devices and the software, the Ron vendors you choose, but also just the onboarding your staff and training. I know when we first started doing Ron's back in my previous vocation at a title agency, it was difficult to get the other person on the other line to show them how to share their screen if they haven't done it before. Now, I think post again, I keep saying post pandemic. I think that's wishful thinking, but post pandemic, quote unquote, I feel like a lot of folks now know how to turn on and turn off their screen, turn on or turn off their microphone. But back in the day, this is not too long ago, in the before times, if you will, it was difficult just to have the words to say, okay, you're going to look for this icon, and slowly it'll become second nature. Slowly it'll become more ubiquitous, and I think that will help too. But not everybody knows how to do that. That's also part of the tooling up as well. You're going to have a little bit of that, dare I say, IT side of things. So.
Right, right. Well, so if anyone's attending MLTA and you want to get the next version of this to learn a little bit more about what we learned, this is meant to be an introduction to people and an orientation. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we learned, we're going into Ron 2.0 at MLTA. So come see that session if you're going to be down there.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Mike. I really appreciate everything you did with us here today. Security Title especially appreciates that. And we really like that you were able to inform our clients about, this great addition to the market. And I'd like to thank you for all of you attending as well. Please keep an eye out for our next webinar in September and all our future webinars as well. I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.